This one could be a little hard to hear for many, because the stuff I'm going to talk about, for me, involved years of ego dissolution, and so for some, this is going to be like a 2-year long course of orthodontics for the soul in under 10 minutes with a hammer. Anyway, buckle up. Aristotle told us that man is a rational animal, and I used to believe that. But as I grew to observe and understand people more, I've come to disagree. Something I've been very disappointed to discover, but something which helped me understand people and to be able to help both them and myself, is realizing that beliefs and actions are not primarily rational, but instead driven by human biological and physiological needs. I first started moving away from the myth that human beings behaved in a rational way around 10 years ago, during my own dark night of the soul, a time in life many people go through where they begin to question everything that they thought they knew about the world. Everything comes into doubt and into question. I used to be a very religious person with a solid framework of belief which helped me to understand the world and my place in it. Gave me a lot of meaning, gave me a lot of security and certainty. And I encountered the work of the philosopher Peter Rollins, who ran a community called Icon. Now, this was a Christian community who, during Lent each year, a period of 40 days in which Christians typically fast or give up something they enjoy as a means of spiritual cleansing, well, this Christian group would give up God. They spent 40 days reading critiques of Christianity, not to try to judge those critiques and prove them wrong, but to let those critiques judge them and point out where their own beliefs were serving a false narrative. And this examination of belief is called a hermeneutic of suspicion. It didn't look at whether a belief was true or false, but just how it functioned in the life of the believer. For example, what does believing this thing allow you to think about yourself? How does it allow you to think about others? How does it allow you to act and treat people, etc.? Examples of this included Karl Marx's understanding of religion as the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. An opium which allowed them to endure bad treatment in the world without rising up against those exploiting them. Another example is Nietzsche's classification of Christian morality as a slave morality, having its origin in the slave class of the ancient world, who embraced Christianity because it claimed that people with no power were actually blessed and chosen by God. But Nietzsche critiqued that and turned it on its head and suggested that by adopting this morality, this slave morality, people were taking their weakness and turning it into a virtue and preventing themselves from actually changing something to get more power. Because instead they could just believe and feel that they were special instead of actually doing anything. How convenient. And in the modern day, around the time that the news of the Gulf of Tiger Woods affairs were coming out, there were lots of people condemning him for his infidelity and saying, no, I would never do something like that. I'm a much better man than he is. The comedian Bill Burr pointed out that most men saying these things don't have a busload of Swedish bikini models waiting for them wherever they go. It's easy to be faithful when no one else wants you. But this is how someone's belief in moral superiority functions. They got to feel like they were better people despite never really being tested in the same way. 2 years ago, I completed a strategic intervention coaching certification, one component of which was around the 6 human needs model popularized by Tony Robbins. These needs are certainty, variety, significance, connection, growth, and contribution. Sounds simple enough, right? But when you start looking at people's behaviors as attempts to meet one or more of those needs, things really start to make sense. Someone with anger issues who would be depressed and inward facing most of the time, but occasionally lash out, well, why were they doing that? Well, if we look at it, we see that lashing out made them feel significant. It made them feel powerful and respected, at least in the moment. But let's take it one level deeper. It seems that our biological needs also drive what we believe about the world. We believe things because they meet certain needs, including about ourselves. Most people on Instagram use it to highlight photos and videos which make them look really good. And they delete the photos and videos where they look a bit weird or not so good. But that's what most of us do with our conscious minds. We need to feel good about ourselves, so our conscious mind becomes like an Instagram profile of positive thoughts about ourselves. And when someone criticizes us for something that might even be slightly true, there's an instinct to want to defend ourselves. Even if we don't fly off the handle, we feel like, hold on a minute, this doesn't feel good. Because the person we think we are, our self-identity, seems to be under attack. So we need to defend. This need-driven thinking is why pickup artists are the most determined sociologists. They see what evolutionary cues elicit the right response, and in a community across the world swapping notes based on hundreds of thousands of cases, they figure out what works. Biology comes before ideology. As Bloodhound Gang sang, "You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals." We have our programming, and our rational minds later justify why we did what we did to keep the positive self-image of ourselves. We're not so much rational as rationalizing. Instinct first, then emotion or reason later. So now that we are all feeling a bit shit about ourselves, what can we learn about this? Well, firstly, I think it's fine to admit that we are mammals. Know that we have strings that can be pulled intentionally or not by others, and that we can be lent heavily towards particular courses of action when those strings get pulled, and we just experience it as our own decision, and we feel like it's our destiny. We really need to feel into ourselves to know what our needs are and to make sure that we're thinking ahead of time on how to meet them in a healthy way. Because if we don't, then someone else will help us meet them in an unhealthy way. And also questioning why we're doing something, even if it doesn't put us in a good light. The series Westworld, especially in earlier seasons, explored what it was to be sentient, what it was to have a soul. It was based on the idea of a Wild West theme park where robots were specifically created to play characters in a role in a game, and they surpassed their programming and became self-aware. And the show put a lot of focus on their evolution, their actions, their feelings, their thoughts, whether it was programmed or whether they were actually sentient beings. That was a mystery that was unfolding. But let's turn that back on ourselves. We're mammals. It's where we came from. It's where we start. Everything we do and think and feel has its base in meeting our biological needs. We have our own programming too. But perhaps it isn't just the robots who have the potential to become more than they were. I don't think we should start at the point of treating human beings like angels, but I think maybe, just maybe, we can, but while operating within our own programming, surpass it. Thank you for listening.